The Treasury Secretary says a housing crisis is brewing and the White House could declare a national emergency. Welcome to the Big Money Show. I'm Brian Brenberg, along with my co-hosts Marcus Lemonis, Jerry Willis, Jackie DeAngelis, and with us for the hour, Making Money host Charles Payne. Welcome, one and all. Scott Bessent believes rate cuts from the Fed would ease America's housing squeeze, but the administration isn't waiting on Jerome Powell. They're considering sweeping reforms from standardizing building and zoning codes nationwide to slashing closing costs for buyers.
And I think that President Trump fundamentally understands it better than any president in history. But look, we got to reverse what happened these last 4 years to get the American dream back. Biden killed the American dream of home ownership, and we're resuscitating it. Every day we're resuscitating it, and we'll bring it back bigger and better and stronger than ever before.
But Scott Bessent is still projecting optimism, telling the Washington Examiner he expects a big economic pickup in 2026. So, Charles Payne, come to you first on this one. The American dream, housing. Is it an emergency situation here? And if we do something like that, do you think that's going to pay economic dividends?
I believe it's been an emergency situation for a long time because I tie it into household formation. And I think this whole fertility crisis, population situation is probably one of the most dire things happening in our nation right now. And it's slow and no one pays attention to it. But the idea that once it crosses the so-called Rubicon, to turn it around. In fact, most wealthy nations, particularly Western Europe, for some reason we're the only species that's not really trying to procreate to keep the species alive. And it's really wealthy folks, and there must be some psychology and other things involved there. But the crisis has gone on a long time. I think rates will play a big role. We don't want the government to go too far, right? We know what that looks like.
I'm thinking 2008 every time something like this comes up, and that's not a happy place
right,
to
we don't
be.
want the government to go too far. There's no doubt about it. Some of it, though, I think a lot of it, honestly, is if you get mortgage rates at 6 and under, I think that's going to be the magic number. I think already supply is already growing. Prices have come down 4 months in a row. That's the right combination to maybe start to get more people to buy.
Okay, so does the declaration of an emergency, Jackie, maybe help with a little bit of the trend? We're seeing more inventory, lower mortgage rates. You know, you put something else on the table around zoning, and that kind of helps get things moving.
Yeah, and this is an administration that focuses on what is the problem and how can I fix it. But what I like to look at is how do we get here, Brian? And Bill Pulte talked about, Biden and killing the American dream. And he did that to a certain degree. Inflation, higher rates, that made it harder for people. Onerous regulations. Trump administration is going to try to roll those back and help with the supply quandary. But I really focused in on what J.D. Vance talked about last week when he discussed the migrant crisis, allowing more than 20 million people into this country illegally, and how those people need to scoop up housing and they need to live somewhere. And so that takes from the inventory and drives up prices. And I think that's a huge piece of how we got here. And I think why I'm bringing that up is because I think it's so important for the American people and the people who watch this show to understand these mistakes cost us. They cost me, they cost you, and they take a long time to unwind. This isn't going to happen overnight, even if Bessent is correct and the president does declare a state of emergency in this regard.
Jerry, I know you're fired up about housing.
I'm fired up.
So I know you're paying attention to this news. Are you fired up by what the administration is talking about? Or like Charles, do you get a little concerned about going too far on this stuff?
Well, you don't want the hand of government deep into housing, right? Like we've seen that before. In fact, George Bush put forward some regulations. He made it easier for people to get mortgage loans. That was a disaster back in 2006. But what I want to see and what has to happen, look, residential construction is in free fall. It's down 3.1% annualized rate in the first half. It's a disaster right now. And what is the problem? It's regulation, too much regulation. On average, the price of a new home, $400,000 plus, a quarter of that, $100,000, is due to regulations. Those numbers coming from the National Association of Home Builders. I like this idea that the president has of KOing capital gains on what you make on a house. That's going to target those markets where prices have gone up the quickest, the fastest, the most, exactly where we need some kind of relief. But, number one, let's get rid of some regulations.
So, Marcus, it's interesting, by the way, another piece of that Scott Bessent floated was was maybe some tariff exemptions around building materials. That would be a cost side thing. Now, that's just an idea that he mentioned. But these zoning restrictions are local. You know about local regulation. I know you do because you deal with it all the time. These are local things. So how do you, at the national level, do you clear out zoning regulations?
I think I may have to sit this one out against the panel. I'm not sure what the emergency is.
Okay.
What's the emergency? First, you started, Charles, talking about the birth rate. That's a separate issue. I'm not sure how that correlates to the housing market.
Well, if you can't buy a house, most people don't want to have kids. I mean, there's a direct correlation between that historically with America and the rise of the American century. And that's one of the key things. If we're going to have a second American century, it's got to center around the home, which is the primary investment. But young couples, if they can't buy a house, they're going to rent a small apartment and they're not going to have kids.
So in the last 48 months, we've seen housing prices skyrocket. And now we're talking about having tariffs on aluminum, steel, wood, and a variety of other things. I'm just confused.
You're talking about removing them for the building materials.
So we're going to pick and choose where they apply?
Well, that's what they're going to do, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they're talking about, look, I mean, that is a pick and choose, but they are talking about picking and choosing maybe no tariffs on these things. I mean, it's
no tariffs depends on who's buying them or where they're being used, because it's not no tariffs unilaterally across the board. It's no tariffs if you're going to build the home. So if Lennar's going to build the home, they're going to fill out a special form and say, we're just buying aluminum and steel to build a house. We're not using it for anything else. And anybody else who's using it to build a car or do anything else, you're going to pay a tariff.
Can I?
I think there's an affordability issue for me more than anything.
I'm so glad that you said that.
Let's call the emergency affordability.
And that's where I was about to go, because I think, Charles, you're touching on that, and I could go on and on, but I won't do it today, about, you know, how expensive it is for people to have kids, why people are delaying those decisions. I agree with you. If you feel like you don't have a place for a family to live, it makes it really hard. So that's one piece of it. But this affordability crisis, Marcus, this is what Zohran, the commie, is seizing on here in New York, and it's resonating with people because rents are so high and it's so hard to get, you know, a place to live. And so I think that really is the thing that the administration is trying to focus on here. I don't always agree with the solutions. So I hear you on picking and choosing, and I kind of feel like if Dagan was here, she would say the same thing. I'm not necessarily sure what the answer is to solve it.
I mean, supply and demand. You have to have more homes, right? So that, I mean, it's supply, but I think a lot of supply will come online because of reluctant sellers, people who locked in pretty good profits who wanted to sell for the last few years, but say, hey, if I sell, no matter what I make in terms of profits and I move somewhere else, I'm not going to pay 7% mortgage, right? It raises. So, you know, I've seen surveys. Right now you have 500,000 more sellers than buyers. Right. So it's completely flipped in the last 4 years.
Which is good. That's how market should work.
Now you got to get to a point where, okay, there's an urgency or, less reluctance. Okay, if I sell, you know, and I make this big profit, 200 grand, and I buy something that's smaller and I'm paying just maybe, 5%, 5.2%, and I had a 3.2. The math has got to work out for the sellers. They have to be motivated.
More supply.
Right, but I'm saying if the sellers create the supply. You can get more supply from.
I'm going to stop everybody for just a second. You want to create more supply? You're going to have empty houses. You want to have empty houses? You're going to have bad commercial loans. You want to have bad commercial loans? You're going to have default.
Bad commercial loans are really
because you're going to build these houses on spec with the anticipation that rates are going to drop. And if they don't, what happens?
Now, I'm talking about people who already own homes selling them.
And where are they going to go? Right.
Well, most of them are going to probably end up going there. Since 20% of
Did you almost say retirement home?
So, apartments or condos, because 20% of the population, the old folks, own 40% of the homes. By the way, the largest percentage of them live alone right now in the history. They're lonely. They're sitting in a house wanting to sell if they can get the right price. They're not going to buy another house when they sell. And so there will be supply out there faster than you could create it, I think, organically.
So I think you objected to the emergency thing. Fine. Can I change the word? What if I just said we got a really, really, really big housing affordability problem, and there are things the administration could do to unlock that log jam?
This country has always had a housing affordability problem. This is not a new thing.
But the scale of it has changed, don't you think?
No, I don't actually.
Marcus, the median home price is multiples higher than it was 40 years ago.
I'll read a stat. We'll skip the opinion for a second. Okay. So the annual income needed to buy a house in 1950 was $3,400. In 1980 was $30,000. In 2007-8 was $61,000. Now it's $110,000. It is by far rocketing far faster than the rate of inflation, much farther faster than the rate of wage growth. No one's wages have grown to this degree. And so, yeah, affordability has never been this is the worst it's ever been.
Did you give us a number from right before the pandemic? Right before the pandemic, it was like $80,000 for the entry-level home. It's now about $110,000, like you said.
Yeah,
That's in a period of 5 years. We've never seen something like that before.
I just want to make one point, though. Prices skyrocketed because interest rates stayed low for so long, and so prices just kept going up, up, up. During the pandemic, we saw it because people were chasing things in the suburbs. They were fighting over homes. Even though we've got an influx of sellers into this market, if they're still kind of digging their heels in, that they've built all this profit in their home and they want to be able to cash that out before they're able to go, and they're not willing to yield in any way. Because typically when rates go up, we've seen prices come down, but these sellers are they've been very, very inflexible. It's coming to the realization that, a certain amount of profit is enough, and at a certain point, you've got to let it go. What that tipping point is.
Well, that's why the administration is talking about like the capital gains exemption,
which I think is a great solution
to try to unlock it.
And I'm all in favor of reducing people's tax burden, especially capital gains. You're the one who took out the mortgage. You're the one who paid the mortgage year after year, month after month, forever. Why shouldn't those gains be yours?
That's right. I agree with that.
Well, Jackie brought up the politics on this. I just don't think you can ignore it. The left is actually playing the affordability game. Mandani, and he's doing a really good job, good enough to be leading in New York City. You got midterms. Look, forget about the economics for a second, or tie them together. The politics of this in a nation that is saying, especially for young people, I can't afford a home. The politics on this are pretty good.
I'd like to see industrial and job creation outside of city centers. And when you have that, you have a reason to build homes. And when you have a reason to build homes outside of city centers, they are less expensive, and the affordability issue gets resolved partially from that.
But
the tariffs are going to drive that.
But we have not seen the kind of job creation that we need. It's at half the level of last year.
That's why we have the tariffs.
Average job creation, $81,000 a month. We need it to be higher to create that income, because you don't buy a house without a job.
We need to make more here. That creates the jobs, in my opinion.
The administration is focusing on. And I would just highlight what you brought up with George Bush and Bill Clinton, believing that everybody should have the American dream. And all of a sudden, we had a huge housing problem on our hands in terms of a bubble and a financial crisis. So I think when government starts to get too picky about how they want to specifically fix it, it is a little bit dangerous.
Well, the Community Reinvestment Act, which was like the third iteration when Clinton got involved with it, was just an unmitigated disaster, right? Yeah. I mean, the liar loans, all of that was it was a wild, wild west. I think what we're all kind of saying, though, is that at least most of us, that there is some sense of urgency, but you can't fix it overnight. Although I think sounding the alarm does help.
Yeah. It gives people a sense that their leaders are on this issue.
If you look at Gallup, and when Gallup asks people what's the best investment out there, by far, every income bracket says real estate, a home, owning a home. In fact, middle and lower income put the stock market like third, I think. So. Right. And soon Bitcoin may pass that up.
That's crazy, though, because if you actually do some of the comparisons, and we've done them, where you rent for a certain period of time or you buy, appreciation hasn't kept up with the stock market has done. So,
but the average American thinks owning a home is the number one.
It's also how it makes them feel.
Yeah,
should be.
Yeah,
sure.
Just very quickly, I'm glad to see young Americans want to own a home, because we went through a very long period where people said, I'm not buying a house, I'm not buying a car, I'm going to rent everything, I'm going to own nothing. I think that's a recipe for disaster.
I think COVID was the change.
Where people wanted to own.
Yeah, we were being told that we should be not an ownership society, and people were buying into it. Like one house on the block and everyone's got an app to share it. You know what I mean? Then after that, you would get in the building, you were afraid to touch the button. Like, who the hell touched this button before me? I'm moving out to the suburbs, right? It changed everything.
All right, speaking of things you can own, Jerry, you're watching gold for us. What's going on?
I am indeed, Brian. Gold soaring above 3,500 to record highs, and it's fueled by mounting expectations that the Federal Reserve will cut interest rates this month. Charles?
No, I mean, there's a lot of things driving it, right? I mean, you can see the writing on the wall the last couple of years when central banks outside of the big ones, right? But all the global central banks really started to load up. And now, of course, it's just seen as the hedge, right? The hedge against uncertainty. And it's the trade. It's also the hot trade. I mean, let's face it, there's a lot of cash out there that chases the hot trade, and this is the hot trade in the moment.
Prices are looking hot right now.